So when our children were quite young, we didn't take too many vacations, but the few we did are quite memorable. And one of the first we took was to the Upper Peninsula. And we had our batch of stuff that we were planning to do. We knew the kids would like Oswald's Bear Ranch. We figured we'd do the Garland Zoo that's along US 2. We'd do the Sioux Locks. We had several things that we had planned on. And of course, as soon as you get over the bridge, what are the first signs that you see, those of you who are veterans of the UP? Say that? Oh, signs for the mystery spot. Yeah. And this was drawing our kids' attention. They'd say, "Mom, Dad, what's the mystery spot? Can we go to the mystery spot?" And Jen and I looked at each other like we had no intention of going to the mystery spot, some kitschy, touristy trap kind of thing. But we thought, why not? This is for the kids to have fun. We'll check out the mystery spot. And by gosh, it was actually kind of fun. It's kind of silly. How many of you have been to the mystery spot? Come on, fess up. Yeah, it's all kind of set up so that it looks like it's gravity defying, right? And it's actually pretty cool. It was fun. And now when our kids in their young adultness talk about that trip, other than also remembering how frigidly cold it was when we did the Sioux Locks tour and we were huddled inside drinking our hot cocoa, wishing we'd picked a different day, the fun thing they remember is, of course, the mystery spot. You just never know what's going to come from life's diversions. Just a few weeks ago, Judy Muir was remembering in our Tuesday morning class, back when we had the 11 o'clock service, and I was talking about in my sermon, I don't even remember for what reason at this point, my trip to Israel in 1999, and how I had gotten up very early one morning because I wanted to go down to the Sea of Galilee, and I wanted to see the sunrise. But I didn't know for sure what time the sun was rising, so I made sure to get up extra early just to be safe. Well, man, had I gotten up extra early. I was waiting there for hours. And finally, when the sun came up, it was all worth it. But as I was telling this story, and people were chuckling just as you are now, one sweet little girl who was sitting about where Paul Riley is sitting now raised her hand. Yep, just like that. And so I figured I kind of wanted to know why she was raising her hand. So I asked, and she said, "Pastor Larry, if you had just watched the weather, they tell you when the sun rises." And I thought to myself, where were you, kid, when I needed you? It was a lovely interruption, a lovely diversion that made for a fun moment that even all these years later, Judy still remembered, because it wasn't so much what she said, but that she wanted to connect, and we had that opportunity for her to share in worship. Kids say the darndest things, right? But it isn't just children who say the darndest things. Us older folks can do the same thing. Between 1998 and 2005, I served at the Cherry Hill United Methodist Church. I think I've told you that before, and it's actually where I followed Pastor Marge in ministry. She was the pastor there, and I came after her, and that was actually the first time that I'd gotten to chat with her at any length, and then how funny it was to come here while she was the associate. We could get reacquainted. It was awesome. And the Cherry Hill Church was it's the same vintage as this sanctuary, 1870s. But it's only from about here back to the balcony in size. And they had a baptismal font that was so heavy. It was solid marble. Thankfully, the top part came off. So when I went to move it, I'd go, and move the top part, and then you'd have to sort of roll the pillar. So obviously, it didn't move very far. But one Sunday, it needed to move to the center of the chancel area because we were having a baptism. And so we did the baptism right at the front of the service. It was less like we did today. It was lovely. It was Native American Awareness Sunday, which we've not celebrated in this congregation because it was not a part of your tradition when I came, but it's one of the special Sundays you can celebrate in the United Methodist Church, and maybe we'll do it one of these years. It falls on the third Sunday of Easter. And so I had kind of tied in baptism stuff and Native American Awareness Sunday, and I was walking up and down the aisles preaching, and right about where Ron Norquist is, the great-grandmother of the little one we had baptized was sitting. And I was kind of walking up the aisle, and she grabbed my sleeve and said, "Pastor, my father was a pastor in a Native American church." I can't remember if she said it was up in Seaboing or just exactly where it was. I can't remember that anymore. But she proceeded to tell a story from her father's pastoring, and it fit beautifully in the sermon. It was a small enough sanctuary, people could pretty much hear what she had to say. She had a pretty strong voice, so I wove it into the sermon, and as we were going, I would kind of come back and revisit it from different points, and it was lovely. It was a cool, holy diversion. Ironically, just about as I was going to wrap up and the sermon was a little longer than I'd intended, thinking she was whispering to the family member next to her, she said, "This sermon's kind of long, isn't it?" To which I wanted to say, it wouldn't have been nearly as long if you hadn't shared your story. However, I'm really glad you did. The holy diversion was more than worth it. More than worth it. And it is amazing to me how many things in Jesus' ministry happen in the midst of interruptions. Things that he hadn't intended to do. Cana of Galilee was the first one of those, at least according to John's gospel. Remember, he just thought he was going to a wedding. He didn't think this was going to be a work day. Going to a wedding, we don't know for sure whether it was a family member or just somebody in the community. He shows up, and of course, what do they run out of? They run out of wine. And there are, if you can see our fountain up here, I always kind of look at it and imagine that it's probably pretty darn close to the size of one of the jars that would have held water for ritual hand washing, and there would have been multiple of them, and the stewards would have had ladles that they'd use to pour over the hands before people would eat their meal. And it was actually those jars of ritual water that then Jesus turns into wine, but he didn't want to do it. Do you remember that? Remember, they come up, and who is it that urges him? It's his mom, right? Moms get us to do anything. And Jesus says, but Mom, it's not my hour yet. I'm not supposed to bust out just yet. And in good passive-aggressive fashion, Jesus just turns to the stewards and say, "Now you do whatever he tells you." "Okay, Mom." And of course, it's even better than the wine that was given at the first, and it's the first of his signs, and Cana of Galilee, this marvelous thing that just came out of nowhere as an interruption, as a holy diversion. And then one day when Jesus was on the road, he was passing through Jericho on his way to Jerusalem. You know what happens at Jerusalem. You know why he's heading in that direction, because everything, all his ministry is leading to Holy Week and to the cross, and through the cross to the empty tomb. So he's on his way. He has a task. And sitting beside the road is this man, Bar Timaeus, which literally means son of Timaeus. He's blind. He's begging at the road, and he hollers out to Jesus. And his disciples, thinking they are acting as good gatekeepers or like a CEO's secretary, will tell him to be quiet. Jesus has got a task to do. And of course, Jesus will have nothing of that. No, bring him to me. And he heals him. Now, it's very interesting, just as a side note. Do any of you happen to remember back from if you studied any ancient Greece kind of stuff, that Timaeus, the Timaeus is a work of, I think it's Plato. Is that right? It's either Plato or Aristotle. I think it's Plato. And it was one of the dialogue kind of things. Timaeus was a philosopher, and the work Timaeus is a work of philosophy. So there are some commentators who think that Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, is kind of the son of philosophy, and he's wearing a cloak. And after he's healed, he gets up and he sheds that cloak, which is a symbol of philosophy. There are some folks who think that Mark is surreptitiously calling us away from abstract philosophy and just thinking about stuff to the more concrete nature of deeds and discipleship and doing things for others and for God. I don't know for sure if that's true, but it sure will preach, right? A diversion. He had no intention, that we know of anyway, of meeting this man along the way. And then we have the scripture that I read today, which is a double interruption, right? So Jesus has just been, imagine my hand is the Sea of Galilee, and on the west side of the Sea of Galilee, I'm doing this wrong because that way's east, so just pretend. And here's the Jordan River. All this stuff is Israel, Judah. Jesus has just gone across the sea to this area over here called the Decapolis, 10 cities or Gentile cities. It's there that he's just healed the demon-possessed man, and it's a big deal, and comes all the way back across the sea, and no sooner does he set foot on soil at home, but this leader from the synagogue in Capernaum, Jairus, comes up and says, "You've got to come. My daughter is dead, but I know that you can bring her back." Interruption number one. Heads right away off to Capernaum. And while he's on the road to Capernaum, interruption number two. A woman who stealthily slips up behind him in the crowd and touches the hem of his garment. And he feels power go out from her. In Mark's gospel, which is always a little bit more detailed, he actually can't find her initially. Matthew skips that part and just goes to he finds her right away. In Mark's gospel, it's a little more interesting because of the crowd. She's kind of slipped away, and he says, "I felt power going out of me. Who was that?" And she comes back up to Jesus and says, "It was me." And she says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." And she'd been bleeding for 12 years. She'd gone to doctor after doctor, had found no relief. And here, not only was she healed of body, but now she was restored to ritual purity, restored to the fullness of community, no one being afraid of her bleeding. A double interruption. All of that because Jesus was open to God's Spirit and the willingness to be diverted from whatever the task was right in front of him. And it wasn't just Jesus. That followed through to his disciples as well. The story that Charlie read for us this morning of Philip. He had been having all sorts of success in Samaria. He was preaching in, of all places, Samaria, right? Having all sorts of success preaching the good news of Jesus. People are following, and the Spirit interrupts him. It says if you were kind of following along carefully, sometimes it gets kind of ambiguous. It talks about an angel of the Lord, but then it says the Spirit later. So I always have sort of taken that there was a messenger that was sort of giving the words to the Spirit of the Lord. It's the Spirit who does the interrupting. He says, "I need you to go on the road that goes from Jerusalem down to Gaza." Doesn't give him any reason. Okay. Philip wandering down the road, and there's this chariot plodding by. And there's obviously a very wealthy person, turns out to be a eunuch who's in the court of the Candace, the queen of Ethiopia, helps with her treasury. So not only does he look well-to-do, but then Philip also sees he has a scroll in his hand. Whoa. Now, you can't just go to the Gaza library in Jesus' day and check out scrolls. Scrolls are expensive. He would have had to have bought that himself. He would have had to have been curious enough as to what these words were to put up a bunch of money to find them. And he's reading the scroll that is presumably a portion of the prophet Isaiah. And it says Philip went up to him. Now, if the chariot's moving, does that mean that Philip is like, hey, buddy, what you reading? Have you ever wondered that? These are the weird things that go through my mind. Or did he just like run up and like hop in the chariot with him? Or did he say, whoa, just a second and stop? However you want to do it in your sanctified imagination. Somehow or another, Philip gets to the eunuch. Says, do you understand what it is you're reading? And the eunuch says, yeah, I mean, I know the words, but I don't really know who are they talking about? He's reading a passage from Isaiah 53, the suffering servant. And Philip begins to explain how this passage is describing perfectly the life of Jesus. Right. Almost the answer to every children's sermon is Jesus. Yeah. So I gave you an easy one. Yeah, exactly. And Philip is like, whoa. Or the eunuch is like, whoa. I think Philip ended up being like, whoa, too. I don't know if the horse whoa-ed or not. We have no idea about that. And as Philip explains more and more what it is to be a part of the family of God through Christ Jesus, mentions baptism, and the eunuch says, well, look, there's water. What's to prevent me from being baptized? Wow, talk about a holy diversion. And Philip says, not a darn thing. Let's go do it. And they go down to the water and he's baptized. Whew. Wow. These interruptions, these holy diversions are not just for Jesus, not just for the disciples of the early church, not just for our foremothers and forefathers, not just for clergy, they are for us. They're for you and me. They're places in our lives for God's Spirit to break in and to work wonders. I want to share with you a C.S. Lewis quote, and I'll have Misty pop up on the screen. After Mr. Rogers and maybe Origen of Alexandria, C.S. Lewis might be one of my favorite theologians. The great thing, if one can, is to stop regarding all the unpleasant things as interruption of one's own or real life. The truth is, of course, that what one calls the interruptions are precisely one's real life. Real life is led in the interruption, in the holy diversion. So who will you let interrupt you today? What will you let interrupt you this week? How will you remain open to God's Holy Spirit and all the holy diversions yet to come?
Give me a listening heart.